Jay Quellen. No Jay Quellen here? Balake. Where is Balake at? Ron.
Ron, president accounted for. Happy Saturday, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Yesterday morning on CBS, in the prime morning news segment, the show, CBS Mornings, published a 9-minute takedown of Scientology. Now, this was an interview with Mike Rinder about his new book, A Billion Years. But there is more to this interview than just promoting Mike Rinder's book. Mike Rinder sat down with Jim Axelrod for a 2-hour interview, and this was edited down to 9 minutes for publication. Not only did CBS publish this on their show yesterday morning, they published it to Facebook, they published it to YouTube, they published the entire interview uploaded as a video to Twitter. Scientology sent an entire delegation to CBS corporate to demand that this interview not be aired, and they succeeded in shelving the interview for a couple weeks. So the fact that CBS basically did an about-face and said, screw you guys, we're airing this anyway, sends a very strong message. It's 9 minutes long. Watch this interview with me, and I'm gonna share some of my thoughts.
This morning, we're going to begin with a look into the allegations, into the inner workings of the Church of Scientology. They come in a new book. It's called A Billion Years. Mike Rinder details the decades he spent as a high-ranking Scientology member. The book is published by an imprint of Simon & Schuster. That's a division of our parent company, Paramount Global. In a wide-ranging interview, Rinder told Chief Investigative Correspondent Jim Axelrod about his experience as a high-up official in the organization. Jim also spoke to a Scientology representative who disputes many of Rinder's claims and calls him an unreliable source and a, quote, inveterate liar. Jim, good morning.
Good morning. Founded in the early 1950s with a remarkable origin story involving galactic warlords, rocket ships, and 75-million-year-old volcanoes, Scientology, say church leaders, is a belief system designed to foster spiritual enlightenment. Mike Rinder grew up in the church, but he told me he went from wanting to save the world with Scientology to wanting to save the world from Scientology.
Now, guys, did you catch that Simon & Schuster is essentially either a division within the same parent company or a sister company, however you want to describe that? Simon & Schuster and CBS are part of the same corporate umbrella. That comes into play here later.
Mike, how you doing?
Mike Rinder is no fan of Scientology.
Please welcome Mr. Mike Rinder.
Which is remarkable since he spent 46 years of his life in the church, rising to a high-ranking position.
I told a lot of lies when I was the spokesperson for Scientology.
His memoir, A Billion Years, describes an organization built on the teachings of one man, Scientology's founder, L. Ron Hubbard.
We believe that L. Ron Hubbard had the answers to everything about life.
And L. Ron Hubbard based his general view of how to fix all problems facing mankind, what did he ground it in?
Hubbard, who'd been a science fiction writer, recorded 3,000 lectures on how to handle every conceivable challenge a Scientologist could face, which he blended with some outrageous claims.
L. Ron Hubbard says, for instance, smoking doesn't cause cancer.
Yeah.
Not smoking enough causes cancer.
Right. But that sort of insanity is also indicative of just how powerful the grip on people's minds is.
I just have to say, I have always thought that was a little tongue-in-cheek when Hubbard said that. It's not like Scientologists are actually encouraged to smoke, just for the purpose of being completely fair and accurate. I have always thought that was tongue-in-cheek. I never smoked. I've never smoked a cigarette. I do smoke cigars, but...
Scientology's journey to spiritual enlightenment is done through a series of courses that Rinder says cost money. A lot of money.
$300,000, $500,000, that's for you to pay for your own participation in Scientology. This is why I said it's a business masquerading as a religion.
Does it cost $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 to reach spiritual enlightenment?
No, absolutely not.
For more than 3 decades, Monique Yingling, who emphasized that she's a practicing Catholic, has been a lawyer for the church.
Guys, Why is David Miscavige sending his personal lawyer to act as a spokesperson for Scientology? Now, part of the reason he trots out Blinky McBlinky face over here is that she's an attorney who's not a Scientologist and never has been. She can say whatever the hell she wants because she has plausible deniability, and she falls back on that plausible deniability very frequently when she speaks on behalf of the church.
The total contributions that you would be asked for if you did every single course on the training route would be less than $50,000, closer to 20 or 30 or something like that.
I can assure you, we are not what you expect.
In 1987, David Miscavige took over as leader of the church following Hubbard's death. Rinder left the church 20 years later after he says he was punished by Miscavige following a news account critical of Scientology. Rinder says Miscavige sent him to The Hole, a detention center on the grounds of Scientology's headquarters in Southern California.
It consisted of 2 double-wide trailers that had been put on foundations and connected. And it was...
How many people might be in the hole at one time?
Well, I counted at one point that there was 130.
130 in 2 double wides?
Yes. And the doors were barred. There was bathrooms but no showers. The sleeping arrangements were on the floor.
There's no such thing as the hole.
It is a startling...
You'll notice she answered the question in present tense. There is no such thing as the hole, which doesn't actually refute any allegation that there used to be something known as the hole. I've always wanted, when people are interviewing Monique, I just wish that at some point someone would ask her, how would you know? Like, you're not a member, you don't work in a Scientology facility or on any Scientology premises. How would you know, and why in the world are you the one here speaking for Scientology?
If not stunning description. Why would he lie about this?
Because it's salacious, and what draws the media's attention is throwing in all these salacious details.
That are always categorically untrue.
Not always categorically untrue. I'm not saying that. And I think there's always a grain of truth to everything myself.
So as someone who's been around the church for 35 years, what's the grain of truth here?
The grain of truth is that the church does have a system of internal discipline when that individuals, for the most part, individuals volunteer for it. And they say they're just very grateful that they had the opportunity, first of all, to redeem themselves and to study more fully the scriptures of Scientology.
Now, by the way, what she's actually talking about is an internal program within the Sea organization called the RPF, the Rehabilitation Project Force. That is the thing where, a Sea Org member who maybe a wayward Sea Org member who's on the verge of being expelled is given an opportunity to redeem themselves and do this multi-year program of physical labor and Scientology enhancement. None of that, no matter what you think about that, none of that has anything to do with the whole. The whole wasn't part of the RPF. Anyway, this is just another example, one example of the benefits of having an outsider come and comment on things is they can be very careless and they don't really have to be answerable for it. Also, by the way, Monique isn't even an attorney who represents the Church of Scientology. She represents David Miscavige personally. It is so awkward and strange to me that no one ever calls her out for why in the world is she there.
Rinder says leaving the church was one thing, but untangling himself from a lifetime following Scientology's belief system was much more difficult.
You leave in 2007, but you still hold on to the teachings. When did you finally reach a point where you're like, oh my goodness, what was I in the grips of?
It took about 6 years.
6 years to what?
To come to that conclusion that, no, this is a load of crap. It's very difficult to accept the fact that you have been so stupid.
I don't think that you can take Mike Rinder at his word when he's answered your questions in the interview.
One thing Mike Rinder and Monique Yingling do agree on, the Church of Scientology's vast wealth.
When I left in 2007, I knew that between the 2 major arms of Scientology that accumulated about $2 billion. in money and assets. That has increased a lot since then.
What's the church worth?
I can't give you a dollar figure, but as I said a bit earlier, the church does have very generous parishioners.
Well, hang on. You can't give me a dollar figure, but you're one of the lead attorneys in dealing with all the tax issues. You must have a sense of the net worth of the Church of Scientology.
Well, the church does have considerable assets, but the real question is...
Millions, hundreds of millions, billions?
Well, the real question is what does the church use its assets for? And it uses its assets to forward its religion.
Actually, no, that wasn't the real question. The real question is how much money does Scientology have? That was the question.
Just and charitable mission.
Am I accurate in describing the assets of the church in billions?
Probably, yes.
All of that, money raised from its millions of members, real estate in prime locations, is tax-free, as the IRS granted Scientology the same tax-exempt status as other major religions in 1993.
People are watching Mike Rinder. What do you want people to know who are watching him share his view of what he says his experience was?
I think your listeners need to know that he is paid for attacking the church, that this is money motivated. Mike Rinder's only source of income for the last 15 years or so has been based on his being a critic of the church.
That is a false statement. Mike Rinder has held a number of jobs that since leaving Scientology that had absolutely nothing to do with the subject of Scientology at all, had absolutely nothing to do with speaking out publicly or making TV shows or doing podcasts. And I would know because for a couple of years, Mike Rinder worked for me in my business doing research for hedge funds. And before that, I know the person he was working with or for before that. And before that, I know the person he was working for before that. And I'd like to say for the record that Mike was still working for me when he started working, I want to say producing, but he wasn't an actual producer for season one. When he started helping to produce the first season of Scientology in the Aftermath. And he didn't even ask to be paid for his work on that show. I was still paying him for a while. And eventually he went to the producers who hadn't even offered to pay him and said, guys, I do need to pay my bills. And eventually they started paying him for helping with the show. They weren't even paying him as much as I had been paying him to work for me. So the idea that anything Mike does or says with respect to Scientology is for money is just complete horse shit. And I love it when they use arguments that can be turned around and used against them just as equally. Monique is paid to defend the church. So by Monique's own rationale, you can't really believe a word that she says either. Right, Monique? All right, let's see what else they say here.
Rinder denies those claims, telling CBS News, "My criticism of Scientology is driven solely by my desire to end the rampant, ongoing abuses within the organization. It is Scientology that is obsessed with making money."
You know people are going to watch this and be like, hang on a second. This guy was the spokesman for the Church of Scientology. You admitted to me in the interviews you told a lot of lies. So why are we supposed to believe what you're telling us about Scientology now?
I can't convince you one way or the other whether I am lying now or then or both. You just got to sort of look at me and go, is there a reason for him to lie now? There is no reason for me to lie now. The only thing that I am trying to accomplish is stop people from getting abused by Scientology.
Today, Rinder lives in Florida, not so far from Scientology's spiritual headquarters in Clearwater. When Rinder left Scientology, he left behind a wife and 2 children.
Wow.
This book, he says, is dedicated to his kids who he hopes will one day leave the organization. In response to the book, Rinder's children wrote an open letter to Rinder, calling the memoir self-serving. They wrote, quote, "You were not our father. Stop telling lies about us, your family, our friends, and our beliefs."
Now, here's what normal people in the media and the normal world would have no way of knowing, is that Mike's children would not ever do or say anything David Miscavige didn't tell them to do or say. Mike's children live in the insular bubble of the Sea Organization. They don't have any exposure or access to the media, the internet, all of these things. There's no way for Mike's kids to even know that Mike wrote a book unless Miscavige or one of his representatives literally went to them and said, okay, your father's written this book, here's what we're going to have you guys do and say publicly. One can understand how easy it is for people that don't understand how Scientology is like North Korea. They really, their access to information, the control over these people with regards to what information they're exposed to is nearly absolute. And Scientology has really used Mike's kids against him in this campaign. So let's see how they wrap it up.
Whoa. Doesn't sound
It's
like
a lot
any,
to unpack.
Yeah, not a reconciliation imminent by any means.
Had to be very painful, though, to hear those words coming from your own children.
It was, and he says, look, all I can do is make the invitation. He makes it clear in the book that he is hoping to leave the door open, but clearly from the response, that door is going to remain closed for quite a while.
So what's he doing now?
So he lives actually not too far from the church headquarters. He has another wife and a new family. She, too, is a former Scientologist.
Wow. Really powerful interview, Jim.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that was pretty great. Mike put up a post on his blog this morning about this interview and some of the drama that occurred behind the scenes on it. You can check out that whole blog on that whole post on his blog if you'd like to. Here's the excerpt from what he posted this morning that I wanted to share with you. Mike says, the greatest irony of this interview is that Scientology has no spokespeople to respond to the media. Typically, their responses, if any, are letters. The only thing they have left is Monique Yingling, who makes it clear she's not a Scientologist, but she has made a very lucrative living from Scientology, tens of millions of dollars over the years. Tens of millions of dollars Scientology has paid Monique Yingling. And yet she is the person they put forth to allege that I attack Scientology for money. Following the Scientology presentation and interview, CBS asked me to respond to this allegation. CBS included my response, but omitted the end. If that was my motivation, I would have taken a payout from Scientology for my silence long ago. It was Monique Yingling herself who was sent to make the first effort to come to an agreement so that I would not speak out publicly, an incident I detail in the book. The woman Scientology sent to Rinder to offer him money for his silence is the same person they trot out to now say that Mike Rinder only bashes Scientology because he's being paid to. What unbelievable irony. And the last thing Mike says about this is, he says, and finally, this is something I wrote in A Billion Years about Monique. While I was in Yingling's office working with her on the Minton settlement, Miscavige constantly called me, screaming at and berating me over the phone. Monique couldn't help but overhear. She asked me, why does Dave treat you like that? I answered that I deserved it. She shook her head. No, you don't, Mike. You work harder than anyone I have ever met. You're smart and doing a great job. I don't think anyone should be treated like that. And I didn't want to agree with her. After all, she was not even a Scientologist, and to do so would have been tantamount to treason in my mind. But while I didn't show it then, it was finally becoming clear to me that she was right. Monique Yingling knows a lot more than she pretends to on TV. So there you have it. When I found out a couple weeks ago that Scientology has succeeded in getting CBS to spike this interview, I was shocked because after 3 years of Scientology in the Aftermath, the TV show, the A&E show that's now on Netflix, you can see it other places. After Going Clear, the book and the documentary, it should be obvious to all the corporate media attorneys that Scientology cannot and will not sue any media organizations for anything they publish about Scientology. That should be very evident. And yet, Scientology did succeed in postponing this interview for 2 weeks. And it was only when they sort of came to terms with the fact that CBS was going to actually publish it that they sent Monique into the CBS studios to record this rebuttal to the interview that Mike had given several weeks prior. And whatever it is that got CBS to do an about-face and change their minds on this, I just hope the message does get sent loud and clear to other media organizations. The days of having to be afraid of Scientology are long gone. And kudos to Simon & Schuster for publishing Mike's book to begin with. Get your hands on A Billion Years, read it or listen to it if you haven't yet, folks. It's an amazing book. All right, everyone, that's all I have on this. Thank you all for watching. Thanks to everyone who watches until the very end, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe